has traditionally been a fairly solitary pursuit, and for many occasions where a fiddler was hired, he would be playing on his own. Learning and practicing, likewise, would largely be, mercifully for the neighbours, carried on alone, in the woodshed or the hog pen. All the more reason then for fiddle players to relish the rare opportunity to get together with others, play together, compare notes, and get a chance to show who was the best at a fiddler's convention. For audiences too, this type of event was an exciting diversion and a chance to cheer on their favourite and to air local rivalries. Fiddlers' conventions have a long and colourful history in the United States. The earliest recorded example is from Hanover County in Virginia, where in 1736 fiddlers competed for a fine Cremona fiddle to be played for by any number of country fiddlers. Such meetings were traditionally associated with celebrations such as St. Andrew's Day or the 4th of July, where they might happen alongside fairs, horse racing, and so on. The peak of old-fashioned contest fiddling arguably happened in Atlanta, Georgia in the early 20th century. A highly successful event drawing 6,000 people was held at Lawrenceville near Georgia on All Fool's Day in 1912. Spurred on by this, a series of fiddlers' conventions was held there from 1913 till 1935. The master of ceremonies at the first event was Colonel Max Poole, a one-armed Confederate veteran who played fiddle with his bow wedged under the stub of his right arm. Many high-profile fiddlers competed at Atlanta, such as Gid Tanner and Clayton McMitchen. Low Stokes, famous for his work with the skillet lickers, won the championship even after losing his right hand in an accident. Not least among the winners was Fiddling John Carson, one of the first fiddlers to make a career as a recording artist. Carson, like many fiddlers of his time, was admired as much for his showmanship as for his technique. A local paper reported that Carson was aided by his singing dog, Trail, the sorriest-looking hound that ever bayed at the moon. He was also a master of trick fiddling, said to have dexterous skill in handling a fiddle in 47 different positions. The papers loved these events and were constantly running and possibly inventing stories of hillbilly fiddlers gawking at the sights of Atlanta, travelling barefoot with their Sunday shoes hung over their shoulders. Carson eventually took charge of the contests and helped to lay down some ground rules to keep out the danger of classical fiddlers entering, or worse still, winning. Only old-fashioned tunes should be allowed. We have had fancy fiddlers who played a half hour at a time and never struck a tune. They'd fiddle and do all kinds of stunts and never get nowhere. They may go all right at the Grand Opry, but they don't belong in a fiddling contest for the Championship of Georgia. That's flat. Another group who were not welcome at Georgia contests were the clergy, who had for generations equated fiddling with the work of the devil. With wicked humour, it was announced that preachers are admitted free but will be charged if their feet are seen tapping. The drama and romance of these fiddle contests caught the public imagination and inspired the poet Stephen Vincent Benet to write his famous poem, The Mountain Whippoorwill, or How Hillbilly Jim Won the Great Fiddler's Prize. This was based on the 1924 contest when the 22-year-old Low Stokes carried off first prize under the noses of 50 of the best-known fiddlers in the state, including the nationally known Fiddling John Carson. Contests at this time were largely regional, but in 1924 in Maine, an international worldwide fiddlers contest was held, drawing contestants from Scotland, Ireland and Canada. It even attracted the great Scott Skinner over from Scotland. Skinner withdrew in disgust halfway through the contest. He claimed it was because of the poor quality of the piano accompanist he was given, though one has to suspect that Skinner, who famously had an ego the size of Aberdeen, realised that his florid, classically orientated style was not going to win him the prize, and sought a face-saving way to withdraw. Nostalgia and a hankering after old-fashioned values were at the heart of the appeal of fiddlers' conventions, and industrialist and arch-conservative Henry Ford jumped on the bandwagon. He sponsored a series of contests at his car dealerships in the mid-1920s, which he described as a search for the king of the fiddlers. He saw this as a way of preserving America's moral fibre and staving off the twin evils of jazz and communism. So keen was he on fostering the good old days that he built Greenfield Village, an idealized frontier town where he hosted barn dances and ordered reluctant executives from his company to attend dance classes. Two factors contributed to the eventual demise of the old style of fiddlers' conventions. One was a move to clean up contest fiddling and remove the element of showboating, trick fiddling, hollering, cross-tuning and the use of hokum, the bowing pattern also known as the double shuffle. This no doubt improved the standard of fiddling technique required to win contests, but at the same time it played down the very things which had attracted such large numbers of excited and partisan fans. The second factor was the general move in American culture away from live old-time music in favour of radio, television and cinema and different forms of music. The 1940s and 50s were a low point in fiddle conventions, but the 60s and 70s saw a revival of interest, with many people outside the traditional southern heartlands taking an interest in old-time music and many new contests being established. There are currently around 40 to 50 annual contests in the USA. 2 in particular have risen to national prominence. Galax in Virginia hosts the Old Fiddlers Convention, which draws up to 30,000 people a year, while Weiser, Idaho has the National Old Time Fiddlers Contest, widely regarded as the most prestigious of all. Large contests such as these provide a great opportunity for aspiring fiddlers to hone their skills and to enjoy the social aspects of fiddling. The parking lot and campsite sessions are seen as being at least as important as what happens on the main stage. Aaron Carter, 2-time national champion, told me, "I always enjoy the offstage jamming and camaraderie more than I enjoy competing in contests, and I know many feel the same. Contests are usually just a good excuse to get together with friends, and if we can earn a bit of money for the trip, this is always a plus." A frequently mentioned downside of these events is that they tend to iron out regional variations in style and repertoire which have developed over centuries. Where once every state and even every county would have had a recognizable style, today these have coalesced into 3 super styles. The Northeast style is strongly melodic and dance-orientated, with influences from Canada, Ireland and Scotland. The Southern Appalachian style is rhythmic, with lots of shuffles and syncopation, while the Texas style emphasizes variation and swing. Aaron Carter suggested to me that the presence of different regional styles can bring problems, saying, "It's very hard to judge styles against each other. It can be like comparing apples and oranges." Perhaps because of this, the Texas style, probably the most highly evolved, has come to dominate, to the extent that it has become the contest style. But what is it that's so special about fiddle playing in Texas? As a style, it lies somewhere between old-time, Appalachian-style fiddling, with its roots in the tunes brought over by English, Irish and Scottish settlers, and Western swing, the country jazz fusion that was all the rage for a brief period in America in the 1930s and 40s. Here are some of the characteristics which make the style distinctive. Most of the repertoire is shared with old-time fiddling, but the tunes are usually played slower, with average speed of breakdowns around 100 to 115 beats per minute. In addition to the English, Irish, Scottish influence, which it shares with Appalachian fiddling, Texas fiddle also draws on the German polka tradition and the Mexican ranchero and mariachi traditions. Texas fiddlers slur lots of notes together in long, smooth bows, the Texas longbow method, and quavers are often swung together rather than played straight. Musical phrases are much longer than normal. Up to 8 bars are phrased together instead of the more normal 2 bars. Whereas Appalachian fiddlers will often play the same A and B parts of a tune many times round, Texas fiddlers will play many sets of variations. Variations and embellishments include often complex double stops, triplets, slides, syncopations, blue notes, and frequent position changes. Texas fiddling does not, however, consist of soloing in the jazz sense. Throughout the variations, the tune is always discernible. Fiddlers aim for a rich tone and clear articulation. Accompaniment is usually provided by up to 3 guitars, all playing a distinctive vamping style where the chords or voicings change every bar. The more elaborate chords are often reflected in the melody lines, for example arpeggiating diminished chords when they occur. Instead of being primarily for dancing, Texas fiddle is more for listening and is more often heard at fiddle contests. The earliest recordings of Texas fiddlers are from the 1920s, and so it's difficult to say in much detail how the style has evolved before that point. Certainly there is plenty of evidence of the popularity of fiddle in 19th century Texas. Among the fiddlers named in newspaper stories is none other than the king of the wild frontier, Davy Crockett. He's reported to have played in the Alamo during the Mexican siege in 1836. A defining moment for country fiddling as a whole came in 1922 when Amarillo-born Eck Robertson became the first fiddler to make a commercial recording. Among the tunes recorded at the Victor Talking Machine Company studios in New York was an unaccompanied version of Sally Goodin, in which he demonstrates the long bow method and plays no less than 13 variations on the basic melody. These features, along with various other elaborations, marked it out from old-fashioned Appalachian fiddling and pointed strongly towards modern Texas style. Other tunes laid down at the same session, including Ragtime Annie, Sally Johnson and Billy in the Low Ground, use a more conventional saw-stroke bowing. What this suggests is that by the 1920s various elements of a differentiated Texas style were in use by some players, although it would certainly be an exaggeration to say that Robertson invented the style single-handed. In the mid to late 30s, artists like Bob Wills and Milton Brown were bringing Western swing to Texas and beyond, a style of music that played modern swing arrangements but used in country instruments and repertoire. It was probably around this time that the modern style of guitar accompaniment evolved, with simple 2 and 3 chord tunes given a spicy new and much more elaborate backing. With such a hot rhythm and the examples of guitar-violin pairings like Venuti and Lang or Grappelli and Reinhardt on the airwaves, it's little wonder that Texas fiddlers also started to swing their breakdowns. The double shuffle, pioneered by Joe Venuti on recordings such as Four String Joe and Kickin' the Cat, was brought into the Texas swing armory by musical brownies fiddler Cecil Brower, where it's now firmly ensconced in songs such as the Orange Blossom Special and Black Mountain Rag. Howdy Forrester, one of Bill Monroe's fiddlers in the early 40s, though originally from Tennessee, spent time in Texas in 1939. He says, "We played a certain style and played right on the tune, the style that Georgia Slim and I played. But when we went to Texas, those fellows really scared the dickens out of me because they were reaching up into the second position and getting notes I've never seen before. I looked at Slim and he looked at me, and we said we'd better go to work here and do something, and we did. If you're in somebody's backyard, you'd better get a hoe just like he's got." The most significant of the new generation of Texas fiddlers was Benny Thomasson, for whom the jazz music on early radio was a huge influence. His father Luke was also a well-respected fiddler and wrote the famous waltz Midnight on the Water. Luke was a friend of Eck Robertson and would often visit the house, proving a major inspiration for Benny as a child. Benny's repertoire ranged from traditional reels, hornpipes, polkas and waltzes to jazz numbers such as Sweet Georgia Brown. In the late 20s, Thomasson began entering fiddle contests. Initially he was unsuccessful, and he deliberately began creating his own variations and elaborations in order to stand out from the rest of the competitors. It was a successful strategy. He brought home 15 Texas state championships and took the world championship 3 times in a row. These contests were the best possible showcase for Thomasson's talents, and soon everyone wanted to play like him. Among the many young fiddlers inspired by, and indeed taught by Thomasson, was the 11-year-old Mark O'Connor, living at that time in Seattle. Recognizing O'Connor's phenomenal natural talent, Thomasson began giving regular weekend-long lessons, concentrating not on technique but on creativity, developing the ability to come up with new variations on old tunes. The two had originally met at the Weezer Fiddle Contest in 1973, and very soon O'Connor was winning the contests himself. In the early 70s, most contests around the US favoured their own regional styles. Traditional old-time or bluegrass players would often win. However, this was soon to change. Quoted in Fiddler magazine, O'Connor explained, "You have to remember that Texas fiddling did not become popular for contests until I eventually won every contest at least once around the country playing in the Texas style. By the time I was 20, I sort of proved it could be done, I suppose." I asked Brian Jimmerson, president of the Texas Old-Time Fiddlers Association, about the recent history of Texas fiddling. He told me that the Texas contest fiddling probably reached its peak in the 70s and 80s. During this time, you still had the older generation who helped create and develop the style coming around and competing. I asked Brian about the nature of the car park and campfire jam sessions, which are an important feature of fiddle contests and conventions. In Britain, we are used to the Irish trad session, where a circle of players will do tune after tune in as near perfect unison as possible. In a tradition where improvisation and variation are valued, this surely could not be the same. He told me, "I've rarely been around a jam session where folks play tunes at the same time. I have heard several young players do this from time to time, but it's because they all learn from the same teacher and have the exact same version of that tune, so they're all playing the exact same notes. Generally, at our jams, the more seasoned fiddlers will play a tune and pass it on to the next person to let them show what they can do with it. It's fun to watch them show off and try to outdo each other, especially on swing tunes. Another jam scenario would be that one fiddler sits with the guitar players and plays until he's ready to let someone else play, and then gives up the hot seat to someone else, and on it goes. Accompaniment for the fiddler at a contest is provided by one or several guitars, the instrument of choice being the Gibson J45 flat top. The guitar style is distinctive and sophisticated, often with a moving bass line and a chord change for every bar. The guitars will start at the first bar of the tune, but will not play an intro. This should come from the fiddler. Depending on the number of fiddlers participating, there can be up to 4 rounds, as is the case at Weezer. The running order for contests in each round is chosen randomly. A fiddler is expected to play different tunes each time round, so he may need to have prepared up to 4 sets. They must be memorised, as sheet music is not allowed. The judges will all be experienced contest fiddlers themselves and will meet with the contestants at the start to outline what they're looking for and to answer questions. Among the main judging criteria listed at Weezer are old-time fiddling style, danceability, rhythm, timing and tone quality. Cross-tuning is sometimes not allowed, while in some contests it's just the retuning itself which is not allowed, and contestants can bring a second fiddle already cross-tuned. As well as the style for contest fiddling becoming somewhat standardised, there is also a core repertoire which most fiddlers on the circuit will soon come to know. For each round of a contest, a player has to perform 3 tunes, a breakdown, the equivalent of a reel, a waltz and a tune of choice, often a rag or hornpipe. Among the most commonly played breakdowns are Ragtime Annie, Billy in the Low Ground and Done Gone, all recorded by Robertson in 1922. Blackberry Blossom, written by Fiddling Arthur Smith, Lime Rock and Grey Eagle, both of which feature 3rd position arpeggios and high E harmonics. Tom and Jerry, Dusty Miller, Sally Johnson, Cattle in the Cane, Brilliancy and Jack of Diamonds. Waltzes provide the opportunity for a fiddler to demonstrate tone and a slow, rich vibrato, as well as often elaborate double-stopped harmonies. The Shannon Waltz was first recorded by the East Texas Serenaders in 1927. Over the Waves was written in 1891 by the Mexican composer Juventino Rosas, while the Westphalia Waltz was originally a Polish tune. Other favourites include Margaret's Waltz and Roxanne Waltz. Wednesday Night Waltz and Festival Waltz are both attributed to bluegrass boy Kenny Baker. One of the finest waltz players and the originator of some of the most exquisite double-stop arrangements is fiddler Johnny Gimble. Gardenia Waltz is one of his best known. Among the tunes played as tune of choice are rags such as Black and White Rag, Beaumont Rag, Cincinnati Rag, Cotton Patch Rag and I Don't Love Nobody. Swing tunes such as Sweet Georgia Brown, Faded Love, Lady Be Good or San Antonio Rose are popular. A favourite tune of choice is the Jesse Polka, written by a colonel in the Mexican Army during the Mexican Revolution. Other popular polkas are Jenny Lind, Heel and Toe, Allentown Polka and Topeka Polka. In Canada, there is often a category for a jig, either instead of or as well as the tune of choice. As we have seen, contest fiddling has been a constant thread throughout the fiddle traditions of America for nearly 3 centuries. It provides motivation for individual fiddlers. It builds community and friendship among musicians and promotes the highest standards of technique. Of all the different sub-styles among the fiddlers of America, the Texas tradition is perhaps the most refined in terms of showing off this technique, and it is for this reason that it has come to dominate. Nevertheless, on the scene as a whole, there is room for fiddle styles of every shape and size, and for most who get involved, it's the taking part which is important, more than the winning.